The old, worn leather soccer ball, its hexagonal patches faded from countless hours of play, sat in the corner of Leo's room, a silent monument to a dream that was slowly gathering dust. It seemed to watch him, a constant, unspoken accusation in its stillness. Leo, a lanky 14-year-old with a rebellious mop of brown hair and a heart that beat in time with the rhythm of a soccer match, was sprawled on his bed. The cool blue light of his phone cast a ghostly glow on a face etched with a familiar and weary frustration. He was lost in the endless scroll, a digital river of fleeting distractions, a cat playing a tiny piano, a comedian's rant about airplane food, a mesmerizing clip of a professional player executing a flawless rainbow flick. Each video was a tiny, insignificant grain of sand, effortlessly filling the precious jar of his day, leaving no space for the one thing that he claimed to cherish above all else. His father, David, a man whose calloused hands were as adept at fixing a leaky faucet as they were at offering a comforting touch on his son's shoulder, had been a silent observer of this unfolding drama for weeks. He saw the fiery passion that ignited in Leo's eyes whenever he spoke of soccer, the way his feet would instinctively tap out a rhythm against the floor as if dribbling an imaginary ball when he watched a match. But he also saw the insidious lethargy that had taken root, the easy and frequent surrender to the siren song of digital distractions. Complaints had become a daily mantra, a tired and predictable refrain that echoed through the warm and cozy confines of their small home. "I just don't have time, Dad," Leo would sigh, his voice laced with a helplessness that chipped away at David's heart. "Between school, homework, and everything else, there's just no time to practice." David knew with a certainty that was both frustrating and heartbreaking that everything else was the very core of the problem. It was the hours that melted away on the couch, the video game controller a seamless and permanent extension of his son's hands. It was the mindless, endless scrolling through social media feeds, the lazing around that stretched fleeting minutes into gaping, unproductive hours. He knew that Leo's jar was being filled to the brim with sand, and the big rocks, the truly important things, were being left outside, too large and cumbersome to fit into a space that was already occupied. One crisp and golden autumn afternoon, as the sun's mellow rays streamed through the living room window, painting dancing patterns on the wooden floor, David decided that the time had come for a different kind of lesson, one that couldn't be found in the pages of a textbook or on the whiteboard of a classroom. He found Leo in his usual haunt, nestled in the corner of the sofa, his thumbs a blur of motion across his phone screen, a vacant and distant expression on his face. "Leo," David said, his voice a gentle but firm interruption to the digital trance, "come with me. I want to show you something." Leo's eyes, slow to refocus from the vibrant, pixelated world to the softer, more nuanced reality of the room, blinked up at his father. "What is it, Dad? I'm in the middle of something." "It'll just take a minute," David promised, a knowing and mysterious glint in his eye. He led his son to the kitchen, where a large, empty glass jar sat on the polished granite counter. Beside it, he had arranged 3 distinct piles: a small mound of large, smooth, gray stones, a heap of smaller, more jagged pebbles, and a significant and inviting pile of fine, golden sand. Leo eyed the peculiar setup, a flicker of curiosity momentarily piercing through his teenage apathy. "What's all this for?" David smiled, a warm and genuine expression that reached his eyes. "A little experiment," he said. He picked up the container of sand and began to pour it into the jar. The fine grains cascaded in, a silent, golden waterfall, quickly filling the container to the very brim. "All right, son," David said, gesturing towards the large, smooth stones. "Now, I want you to put these big rocks in the jar." Leo frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion. He picked up one of the heavy stones, its surface cool and smooth against his skin. He tried to push it into the jar, but the sand was packed tight, a dense and unyielding barrier. There was simply no room. He tried with another, smaller rock, but it was a futile effort. The jar was full. "It's not going to work, Dad," he said, a familiar hint of his earlier frustration creeping back into his voice. "The jar's already full of sand." "Exactly," David said, his voice soft but his gaze intense and unwavering. He carefully emptied the jar, the sand pouring out onto a large tray he had wisely placed on the counter. He then handed the empty jar back to Leo. "Now, try it again." "But this time," he said, pointing a meaningful finger at the large stones, "put the big rocks in first." Leo, his interest now genuinely piqued, did as he was told. He carefully and deliberately placed the large stones into the empty jar, one by one, until they were all nestled at the bottom, a solid and unshakable foundation. "Now the pebbles," David instructed. Leo poured in the smaller pebbles, which rattled and clinked as they tumbled down, cleverly filling the gaps and spaces between the larger rocks. "And now," David said, his smile widening with a sense of quiet triumph, "the sand." Leo took the pile of sand and began to pour it into the jar. To his utter astonishment, the sand flowed down, a golden river finding its course, filling all the remaining spaces around the rocks and pebbles. Settled into every nook and cranny, every tiny unseen void, and soon the jar was full, containing the big rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. He looked at his father, a dawning and profound realization illuminating his young face. "The jar," David began, his voice imbued with a quiet and gentle wisdom, "is your day. It's all the time you have. The big rocks," he said, tapping one of the large stones through the clear glass, "are the most important things in your life. Your family, your health, your education, and your passion, Leo. Your soccer." He then pointed to the pebbles that were visible between the larger stones. "These are the other things that matter, but are not as critical. Things like your chores, your friendships, spending quality time with your family." Finally, he ran his finger through the fine, golden sand that was visible at the very top of the jar. "And this," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a conspiratorial and intimate tone, "this is everything else. The small stuff. TV shows, the video games, the endless, mindless scrolling on your phone. The lazing around." He looked directly into Leo's eyes, his own filled with a father's boundless love and deep-seated concern. "If you put the sand into the jar first," he said, his words echoing Leo's own from just a few moments before, "there's no room for the big rocks. But if you put your big rocks in first, the things that are most important to you, you'll find that you have plenty of time for everything else. The sand will just fill in the gaps." He placed a firm and reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. "You keep telling me you don't have time for soccer, son. But the truth is, you have the time. You're just filling your jar with sand first. Your soccer practice, that's a big rock. Something you love, something that makes you feel alive and purposeful. If you make it a priority, if you put that big rock in your jar first thing in the morning or as soon as you get home from school, you'll be amazed at how much time you still have for the sand." The silence that followed was not awkward or uncomfortable, but pregnant with a profound and transformative understanding. Leo looked at the jar, a miniature and perfect representation of his life, then at his father, and for the first time in a long, long time he truly heard him. The analogy was so simple, so elegant, yet so incredibly powerful. It was a visual and visceral representation of his own life, his own wasted and squandered time. He saw the hours he had poured away like countless grains of sand, leaving no space for the one thing he claimed to love and cherish the most. A wave of complex emotions washed over him, a stinging sense of shame, a pang of deep regret, and a burgeoning and unfamiliar sense of hope. He thought of all the times he had chosen the easy, passive distraction over the challenging but rewarding effort. He thought of the soccer ball in his room, a silent and patient sentinel gathering dust. He thought of the dream that was slowly and inexorably slipping through his fingers, like the fine, golden sand in the jar. That evening, something fundamental and profound shifted within Leo. The next day, he woke up with a newfound and steely resolve. The first thing he did, even before the familiar and reflexive reach for his phone, was to grab his soccer ball and head out to the dew-kissed backyard. The morning air was crisp and cool, a refreshing balm against his skin, and the damp grass felt soft and forgiving beneath his feet. He practiced his drills, the rhythmic and satisfying thud of the ball against his cleats a comforting and empowering sound in the quiet morning air. He was rusty, his touches a little clumsy and uncoordinated, but with each kick, with each successful dribble, he felt a spark of his old, familiar passion reignite, a warm and welcome flame in his heart. When he came back inside an hour later, sweaty, invigorated, and alive, he found that he still had ample time for a proper, unhurried breakfast before school. He even had a few precious minutes to spare, which he used to pack his school bag, a task he usually rushed through in a last-minute, adrenaline-fueled panic. Through school, the temptation to flop onto the couch and lose himself in the seductive and immersive digital world was strong, a familiar and powerful siren call. But the image of the jar, of the big, important rocks being crowded out by the insignificant and meaningless sand, was fresh and vivid in his mind. He resisted the urge, a small but significant victory, changed into his soccer gear and went back out to the yard. He practiced until the sun began its slow and graceful descent, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of fiery orange and soft, gentle purple. He was tired when he finally came in, his muscles aching in a way that was both painful and deeply satisfying. But he also felt a profound sense of accomplishment, a quiet and steady pride that had been absent from his life for too long. He found that he could still watch a little TV with his family, still chat with his friends online, but these activities no longer held the same hypnotic power over him. They were now the sand, the small stuff, filling the gaps in a day that had already been defined and shaped by his big rocks. The days bled into weeks, and Leo's new routine became an ingrained and cherished habit. His skills on the soccer field improved dramatically, his movements becoming more fluid, his shots more accurate, his confidence soaring. His coach noticed his renewed focus and unwavering dedication, and his teammates were both surprised and impressed by his remarkable progress. He was no longer the boy who complained about not having enough time. He was the boy who made time for what mattered. But the changes weren't just confined to the soccer field. Leo found that he was more focused and engaged in school, his grades improved, and he felt less stressed and more in control of his life. By putting his big rocks in first, he had not only made time for his passion, but he had also inadvertently created a more balanced, harmonious, and fulfilling life. One evening, as he was meticulously cleaning his soccer cleats after a particularly grueling and muddy practice, David came and sat beside him on the back porch. He didn't say anything for a few moments, just watched his son with a quiet and profound pride that shone in his eyes. "You know, Dad," Leo said, his voice breaking the comfortable and companionable silence, "that jar thing, it really worked." David smiled, a warm and loving expression. "I know, son. It's a simple lesson, but it's one of the most important ones you'll ever learn." Leo looked up from his cleats, his eyes shining with a newfound and hard-won maturity. "It's not just about soccer, is it?" "No," David said, his voice filled with a deep and resonant affection. "It's about everything. It's about figuring out what your big rocks are in life and then making sure you always put them in your jar first." If you can do that, you'll find that you have a life that is full and meaningful and happy. Leo nodded, a genuine and heartfelt smile spreading across his face. He looked at his worn-out soccer ball, no longer a symbol of a fading and neglected dream, but a testament to a dream that was being actively and passionately realized, one big rock at a time. He understood now, with a clarity that was both liberating and empowering, that time was not something you find but something you make. And by choosing to make time for his passions, for the things that truly and deeply mattered, he was not just becoming a better soccer player, he was becoming the architect of his own fulfilling and meaningful life. The story of the jar and the rocks became a cornerstone of Leo's life, a guiding principle that he carried with him through all the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. It was a lesson learned not through a stern lecture or a harsh punishment, but through a simple yet profound act of a father's unwavering love and gentle wisdom. And it was a lesson that would shape him into the man he was destined to become, a man who knew the difference between the sand and the stones and who always put the big rocks in first. The moral of the story is that our time is a precious and finite resource, much like the limited space within a jar. If we fill our days with small, insignificant activities, the sand, we will inevitably find that we have no room for the things that truly matter, our big rocks. By identifying our most important goals, passions, and values and making them our top priorities, we can ensure they have a prominent and secure place in our lives. The lesser but still enjoyable activities can then naturally fill the remaining spaces, creating a life that is not only productive and successful but also deeply fulfilling, balanced, and joyful.